waist height. It really is an amazing sight out there. And also, of course, people don't have power, they don't have water, so trying to get food to those people, hot food particularly. A helicopter run has been going on Saturday, bringing in hot food to suburbs from a town where they do have power and water. They're making the food there, they're keeping it hot, they're shuttling it in by helicopter, and people in the suburbs, therefore, having their first hot meal in days.
Now, South Sudan will become the world's newest country on July the 9th, and the country's new government has a daunting task of building a state. Now, much of the South was destroyed during the Civil War, and officials are having to start their task from scratch. And one of their many challenges is to create jobs for the people. Harun Mutasa reports from Juba.
18-year-old Gloria is gaining some much-needed skills. According to the United Nations, around 85% of adults in southern Sudan can't read or write. That's why this auto mechanics class could give Gloria the head start she's looking for.
Others are getting afraid because there are no jobs. If you have certificate, you will not get a job here in southern Sudan. But if you have the knowledge of doing such things, it will help you.
Many schools were destroyed during the Civil War. Juba Technical College is being rebuilt by Plan International, one of many non-governmental organizations working in the region. Southern Sudan will gain independence on the 9th of July. Job creation is one of many challenges facing this new nation. There are no unemployment figures, but officials say the number is far too high. Victoria is looking for anyone who can employ her as a social worker, but there are no vacancies.
You can see many people there looking for jobs and they are not getting anything to do. Yeah. Then some of them maybe they may think to go and do some other things like business, but it's very hard to start.
Officials hope to one day have a dynamic economy that will create jobs, but right now the resources simply aren't there.
The challenges are actually those connected with funds. So to counter this, people will have to sit down and try to plan better how to manage these finances.
But it's not just about creating jobs for those already in southern Sudan. Officials say close to 400,000 Southerners still living up in the north plan to head back to the region, and some fear this will put more pressure on already stretched resources. Aid agencies say hundreds of thousands of people have returned in the last few months. Sustainable development is crucial for a people hoping independence will improve their lives by creating a steady stream of work. Harun Mutasa, AlJazeera, Juba, Southern Sudan.
This is Al Jazeera, and these are the stories making headlines. The US President Barack Obama has announced sanctions will be placed on Libya's leader Muammar Gaddafi and his 4 children. The United Nations chief, Ban Ki-moon, has also urged the UN Security Council to take similar concrete action over the Libyan crisis. But the longtime Libyan ruler remains defiant. He addressed his supporters once again, promising to fight to hang on to power. Iraq's largest oil refinery has been attacked by gunmen. Officials at the Beji complex in northern Iraq say the men planted bombs and set the plant on fire. 1 engineer was killed and another injured. Jane Araf has more from Baghdad.
We've just spoken to the deputy director, actually, of the Beji complex, and he tells us that at about 4 in the morning, gunmen did burst in, but the major injuries and the 1 casualty of an engineer was caused by bombs that were set off and smoke inhalation. Essentially, these gunmen burst in, laid bombs, set them off. They set the refinery on fire, that part of the refinery, essentially shutting it down and killing 1 of the engineers. Another one was seriously wounded. Now, this is expected to take that part of the refinery out of commission for the next several weeks. He actually says one of the problems has been that it was underprotected, and they will have to beef up security.
In Egypt, there have been angry confrontations between activists and soldiers just 2 weeks after President Hosni Mubarak was toppled. The protesters want the military to replace the cabinet that was appointed by Mubarak before he stepped down. They say soldiers beat them with batons, used tasers, and fired into the air to try to disperse them while they were protesting outside a government building in Cairo. Exit polls in Ireland suggest the ruling Fianna Fáil party has suffered a huge defeat in the general election. The main opposition looks on course to lead the next government, but without an overall majority. The counting has just got underway. And police in New Zealand say the death toll from Tuesday's earthquake has now reached 145. But since more than 200 people remain missing, that number is expected to rise. Search teams from 6 countries are helping local rescuers, but no survivors have been found since Wednesday. Those are the headlines. The news continues in half an hour after Counting the Cost. Do stay with us.
Hello, I'm Hazem Seeker. This is Counting the Cost on Al Jazeera, our weekly look at the world of business and finance. This week, Libya. From international pariah to partner and back again, we look at that country's role in the global economy as oil prices continue to rise. We're at the London School of Economics, where Gaddafi's son once studied and submitted a 400-page report on civil society and human rights. And as the unrest spreads, governments struggle to get their people out. We look at Turkey's relationship with Libya. Well, the world has been doing business with Libya for years, but now as Gaddafi's regime allegedly bombs its own people, was the West right to pour billions of dollars into the oil-rich country? The price of oil is steadily rising as the unrest there continues, hitting stock markets and consumer spending hard. In a speech to Kuwait's parliament, UK Prime Minister David Cameron said countries like Britain were wrong to support oppressive regimes for the sake of stability.
For decades, some have argued that stability required highly controlling regimes and that reform and openness would put stability at risk. So the argument went, countries like Britain faced a choice between our interests and our values. And to be honest, we should acknowledge that sometimes we have made such calculations in the past. But I say that is a false choice. As recent events have confirmed, denying people their basic rights does not preserve stability. In fact, it does the reverse.
In 2008, Italy agreed to pay $5 billion to its former colony Libya in reparations, and that opened the door to numerous deals. And now Berlusconi's attempts to befriend Gaddafi and his regime could be backfiring. And as Banu Batnaga reports, Italy isn't the only country caught up with investments in Libya.
What does the Juventus Football Club, Italy's biggest bank and the country's biggest oil company have in common? All have a Libyan connection. After the oil-rich country renounced weapons of mass destruction in 2003, it's been the darling of the West, managing to secure multi-billion-dollar deals, make investments right around the world, even secure the early release of the convicted Lockerbie bomber. Now, from Washington to London to Rome, it all seems a bit premature, and Libya's former colonial overlord Italy stands to lose the most. The Libyan Foreign Investment Fund owns 7.5% of Juventus, one of the world's most successful football teams. Libya is the largest shareholder in Italy's biggest bank, UniCredit. The Libyan central bank governor is also UniCredit's vice president. Then there's the Italian oil company Eni, which has been drilling in Libya since 1959, longer than Gaddafi has been in power. Italy relies on Libya for a quarter of its crude oil. And 2% of Italy's biggest defense and security firm, Finmeccanica, is also owned by Libya. Italy's Silvio Berlusconi and Muammar Gaddafi signed a 2008 friendship treaty in which their two countries promised billions of dollars in mutual investments and a promise from Gaddafi to curb illegal immigration. Since then, Libyan and Italian interests have become more entrenched, and now at a time of uncertainty in Libya, concern is mounting in many boardrooms. But Italy isn't alone. Gaddafi's overtures with the outside world stretch far beyond the Mediterranean. Take a look at this list of all the known companies and the countries where they're based with significant oil deals in Libya. They all stand much to lose as the situation there deteriorates.
I assure you that American oil companies and British as well as Italian are involved in Libya, and they signed contracts in the last 2 years.
Relations with the UK improved back in 2004. As then Prime Minister Tony Blair shook hands with Gaddafi, Anglo-Dutch oil giant Shell signed a multi-million-dollar gas exploration deal off the Libyan coast. Fast forward a few years and British defence companies were allowed to sell projectile launchers and crowd control ammunition to Libya. Now though, facing scrutiny over the possibility British weapons could be used against the Libyan people, the government has cancelled at least 8 arms export licenses. And while the US has been critical of Britain cozying up to Gaddafi's regime, Washington has allowed firms to quietly conduct business as usual. In 2007, US firm Occidental signed a deal to spend $5 billion over 5 years developing oil production.
The ex-Prime Minister of Britain, Mr. Blair, visited Gaddafi 3 or 4 years ago, and they reached an understanding, after which we heard that the Libyan who was imprisoned in Scotland has been released. Of course, the Americans didn't like that, and consequently, they thought that the release of the Libyan prisoner was due to an understanding about granting British companies some more concessions, oil concessions in Libya. That's why the focus of attention was on Britain. But remember that the Americans are up to their neck in their involvement in Libya.
Libya's wealth and Gaddafi's family have become irreversibly entangled in the global economy. What happens in that country and to the regime will have reverberations right across the world. Banu Bhatnagar for Counting the Cost.
Well, joining me now from Rome is Maurizio Caprara, diplomatic correspondent for the Italian daily Corriere della Sera. Maurizio, thanks for being with us. Have the chickens come home to roost here for Italy? Is it paying the price for years of getting friendly with a regime that many people say is now showing its true colors?
Obviously, relationships are a problem now with Libya in this moment, and Italy. Italian Prime Minister Silvio Berlusconi signed in 2008 in Benghazi a friendship treaty with Muammar al-Gaddafi that joined efforts, Italian efforts and Libyan efforts for developing a lot of activities. And the decision was that Italy has to give $5 billion in 20 years for infrastructures and social activities and so on in Libya. And now, obviously, there is a great problem at this moment.
And what about the personal relationship between Berlusconi and Gaddafi? They're both leaders who, some would say, have an eccentric side to their personalities. But how is that personal relationship between the two of them? What kind of a role has that played in cementing some of these deals?
The relationships improved a lot